What does your comfort zone look like to you? If I asked you to draw an actual line at what your limit was, what you're capable of, what would that look like for you today? I'm into ultra-endurance sports, which is a field that's all about finding your limits and pushing past them. I set myself a challenge to run solo and unsupported across a mountain range on every populated continent, a series of challenges that took me 5 years to complete and saw me run over 4,500 kilometers in amazing wilderness areas like the Atlas Mountains and the Andes in Bolivia, and even my home range of the Canadian Rockies. But it started in Kyrgyzstan. So I love looking at maps. Does anyone else here just really dig a map? Thank you, good. It's the way that I procrastinate. I might be sat at my laptop, meant to be doing something else, and I'll find myself scrolling to maps. That's the guilty tab that I always have open. And I was doing this one night, scrolling at maps, and I found Kyrgyzstan. And I love zooming in on these places and looking them up and looking for images of what it's like on the ground. I like searching about the country and the culture. I love making imaginary adventures while I'm looking at maps. I go deep when I do these daydreamings. So I found Kyrgyzstan, this Central Asian country covered by the central Tian Shan range. And I saw these mountains, and I kind of had that heart-stopping moment where I was like, my life isn't complete until I go there. I have to confess, while I was doing this little daydreaming, looking up about Kyrgyzstan, the land of nomads, and learning what I could, I also had a glass of wine in hand, and that can supply courage. And I came up with this idea that I could run across Kyrgyzstan. It was only 1,000 kilometers across this whole country. It was a small country. And while I was looking this up, trying to figure out the feasibility, tracing imaginary lines along this map that I was looking at, I also found out that no one in recorded history, man or woman, had ever run across Kyrgyzstan. And that was really exciting, because it seems like we live in a day of exploration where everything has been done. We've gone everywhere, we've done everything. The world's first expeditions have all been ticked off, and then I found this whole one that I could put my name to, without taking a second to pause and wonder why no one had run across Kyrgyzstan yet. So I set about planning this trip. I decided to do it for real. It was a lot of training weekends in the highlands, honing in on my pack, because I had to carry everything I was going to need to survive this 1,000-kilometer run. It was really important to me to do it unsupported. And I finally landed in Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan, a few months later, ready for my attempt at this expedition. And when I got to Bishkek, I only had two things I had to do. I just had to adjust to the altitude, which would take a few days, and I also had to buy some gas canisters for my camping stove, because of course you can't fly with them. And so I went down to the mountaineering office, which was the only place that you could buy them at the time. And the officer who was working there that day said, what are you doing in Kyrgyzstan? What are your holiday plans? And I said, I'm going to run all the way across Kyrgyzstan. I've got this little backpack with my camping equipment. I think it's about 1,000 kilometers. Might take me a month, who knows? It's going to be great. And this officer just goes, no. He goes, Kyrgyzstan is really big. The mountains are really tall. And once you leave the city, there's nothing out there. There are no hotels, no shopping malls. There's no phone signal. What will you do? No. This is a terrible idea. And then he, told me other different things I could do in Kyrgyzstan instead, like book a jeep tour to a lake or something like that. And I decided to bite. I had nothing else to do aside from adjust to the altitude. I was bored. So I said, no, man, you're wrong. This could be done. Let me show you. And he had this big map of Kyrgyzstan on his wall. So I showed him. I said, I'm going to start in Karakol in the northeast of the country. And I showed him my route, which mountain passes I would use to cross the range, which valleys and rivers I would use as navigational handrails, and which villages I would resupply in every 5 or 6 days. And all the way until I got to the southeast corner of the country, Osh. I said, this is my route. And he follows along, and he goes, you know what, actually, this is a good route. He goes, this is a good route. It could be done. And the way he delivered the next line, I swear will ring through my ears for the rest of my life. He looked me up and down, a woman in my 20s. I had purple nail varnish and cut-off shorts. And he looked me up and down. He said, this could be done, but not by you. Right? And he made it really clear, he was very honest about the fact that that was based on my age and my gender, limitations that were completely outside of my control. So I walked out, brushed it off. Any woman who is engaged with the outdoor arena, she's met this guy. We've all met him before. You brush it off, walk away. I do have to report, Kyrgyzstan is the friendliest nation on earth. I've been there 3 times now. They are so nice, but he was not an isolated incident of people telling me this couldn't be done. In fact, every single day in that expedition, or at least the days that I did see people, because I was out there alone quite a lot, everyone told me, no, this can't be done. Even my friends and family back home had tried to persuade me in a different direction. I was constantly told, no, this can't be done. But obviously I did it. It took me 25 days. It was the 25 hardest days of my whole life up until that point. I had faced all my limits. The edge of my comfort zone was a distant memory behind me. I'd been so uncomfortable for 25 days, physically, emotionally, mentally. But on that last day, I'm running towards the city gates of Osh. I'd come down out of the wilderness, and I was on the highway to the city gates. I could see it. I knew that I'd done it. Tears are streaming down my face. I've actually made it. And even in those last hundreds of meters, cars were pulling over to offer me a lift, saying, it's too far, you'll never make it to Osh. Reaching the finish line was a feeling of total empowerment. It was knowing that I could do things. It was a feeling that I'd never really felt before, knowing that I could push past what my limits were, what the limits that other people put on me, and the limits that I had on myself. I felt like there might be an inkling that I might be capable of so much more than I'd ever realized. And that really emboldened me to continue on this journey, to take on more big projects and also get into the world of ultra racing. So that led me actually back to Kyrgyzstan. A few years after that first expedition, I was back to compete in the Silk Road Mountain Race. This race is dubbed as one of the hardest bike races in the entire world. The distance is just shy of 2,000 kilometers. It's single stage and unsupported, which means the clock never stops, and you have to carry everything that you need on your bike. My bike there weighs about 25 kilograms because it's got all my camping equipment. You have to be a trailside mechanic, your own medic, your own cheerleader. You're out there completely alone. You get 15 days to finish the race. Most years, fewer than half the participants ever make it to the finish line. I'd actually won the inaugural edition of the race, which really surprised me, and according to some newspapers that actually read about it, it surprised everyone else. So this time I came back because I'd proven to myself that I was capable of stuff, and now I really wanted to know. I thought, what if I really let myself drive up my comfort zone? What if I really let myself push my limits? How could I compete in this race? How hard could I push this? How far past my barriers could I go? So the way that the race works, you've got 15 days to do it. You're obviously going to have to sleep, but the clock doesn't stop. Your competitors might also not stop. So most people will sleep literally right next to the trail. They'll just put down their sleeping bag or their tent, and they'll just sleep there for a few hours. So I had a race strategy. I was going to sleep every single night for 3 hours between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. This is a very carefully planned out strategy. The only exception is that the race goes to really high altitudes, and I never wanted to sleep too high because, of course, it's really cold at night, usually well below freezing, and also you won't get good recovery at a higher altitude. So a few nights into the race, I had to face this dilemma. It was coming into sunset, and I was headed towards one of the biggest mountain passes in the race. It's a 4,100-meter climb, and I knew that I was going to hit it during the time that I ideally would be asleep, but I wouldn't be able to sleep up there at 4,100 meters. So I had to decide. The conservative strategy, and what I would recommend to anyone going into the mountains, would be to not do the mountain pass at night. The temperatures at the top will be well below freezing. Indeed, I've been up that pass before, and there was a snowstorm in the middle of August, so I know that the conditions could be really rough. The trail is really hard to see in the dark, which makes it incredibly dangerous, and if anything does happen, you could be waiting way into the next day before anyone is going to find you. There's no mountain rescue in Kyrgyzstan, fun fact that I learned after my first time there. So conservatively, you would decide that's a terrible idea and you should wait until daylight. But if I'd stopped to wait till daylight, it would have taken about 10 hours that I would have lost in the race. And I said to myself, well, you came here to look at your comfort zone, so, the facts on the table, I am really experienced. I'd been up that same mountain before, so I did have the skill set necessary. I was packed well, so if there was a snowstorm or something like that, I wouldn't become a rescue liability. I would actually be able to survive. I would be fine. Technically, it's possible, but to be totally honest with myself, I was just shit scared. I was so scared. It was going to be incredibly uncomfortable. I knew how hard this pass was. It took hours of walking with your bike like that, except for in the dark. I knew that it would be so cold that I would lose feeling in my hands and feet. I knew that being hard to see the trail, I would just get scared, and I would get upset, and I would hate the whole thing. Basically, I would be so uncomfortable. And that was when I knew I had to do it, because I said I was going to go past my comfort zone. So I set myself a mantra then. I love a mantra. It might be a Canadian thing. Love a mantra. And I set it as, be brave. Be brave enough to do something even though it's scary. Be brave enough to do something even though everyone told you you shouldn't do it because you'll hurt yourself. Be brave enough to go find the edge of your comfort zone and take a few steps past it. And it got me through the night, and so I set be brave as a reminder on my phone for the rest of the race. It took me 11 days to reach the finish line, and once again I got my title as first woman. And once again, when I reached that finish line, it was that sense of empowerment that I really felt, knowing that if you had asked me then where the limits of my comfort zone were, where I would draw that line, it was now so much experience past where it used to be. It was so much further past that first trip to Kyrgyzstan, and it was so much further before where it was before I went there in the first place. And that's the advice that I would give to anyone. I know that this is TEDx, so there's going to be lots of different people from lots of different arenas. I think that adventure is a mindset. For me, it's sports in the mountains, but it can also be starting a business or a venture or embracing who you are and sharing that with the world. Adventure is a mindset, and the advice I would give to any adventurer is to be brave. There's one thing that I've learned about your limits, about the edge of your comfort zone, and that is that your limit is a fluid line. Every time that you meet the edge of your comfort zone, every time that you meet your personal limitations, you actually push them back, and then you become capable of so much more. Thank you very much.